right, good morning again, and thank you everyone for coming. My name is Sabira Gordon, and I'm the Executive Director for the Commission on Equity and Opportunity, and I'm really happy to see everyone here today. As you probably know, Representative McGee and I have been working on reentry for a couple of years now, and a part of that work led to a working group being put into statute last session that said we needed to look at housing and reentry. It's interesting because I think when we came into this last year and we decided we were going to look at housing and employment, I think every single person that we spoke to ended up saying to us, well, you're at the end. We're talking about housing is our first and most immediate need upon leaving incarceration. So I think we started at the end and we're taking a step back this time. And I'm really happy for that everyone is here today. And I want to introduce my friend Representative McGee, who is a real leader in this work and has, I think, taken this charge and has a great passion for doing what he does. So a little personal story. My husband has been he has been a part of the criminal justice system. He did not get incarcerated, but he has a criminal record. And I have seen how that has affected my family personally. And the reason we bought a home was because we got turned down for an apartment. We went to apply for an apartment, and I keep saying, in not the best neighborhood. And they sent us a letter and said, unfortunately, because of your criminal past, you cannot live here. And that, for me, it was interesting. I didn't know he had a criminal past until we got that letter. So that letter allowed us to have a very interesting conversation because I don't think, we were just dating at the time. That wasn't one of the questions I asked. Wait, have you been in trouble with the law? So, but it opened my eyes. And, for us, fortunately, it was not a do or die situation. We just said, well, if no one will rent to us, then we'll buy a house instead. But I thought I can think of the many families that it's not that situation, right? They end up not being able to find a place to live, and that leads to dire consequences for those families. So that's just a little quick opener about me. And so the commission, I think you'll get, there might be something in here about the commission, but we're a nonpartisan agency at the legislature, and we work for families, specifically African American, Latino, Puerto Rican, and Asian Pacific Islander families here in the state of Connecticut. Many of the individuals that we advocate for, they don't have lobbyists. They are the individuals who need the legislature the most and need the work that we're doing here the most, but they don't have a voice and they don't have access. So we try to provide that voice for them and make sure that all the policies that the state is making and everything that the legislature is doing is the right thing for all families in Connecticut, because this system was not created for people that look like me and Brandon, and it's great to have someone like Brandon here at the legislature, but there needs to be more of him and more people who care about these issues. And I'm very happy to be leading this work with Brandon. I look forward to this working group and look forward to hearing from all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Sabera. Good morning, everyone. I promise you my comments will be brief, but I am delighted that each of you are here today to continue this conversation around reentry. I would be remiss if I didn't thank each of you for the work that you are already doing around this very issue. This conversation isn't new. Many of you have been doing this longer than I have been thinking about it. And that was something for you to laugh at, but you all look amazing. But similar to Sabera and her personal story, this is really near and dear to me. As a young child, my father was in and out of the judicial system, and I know too well, like many other families, the impact that this has on a family unit. And so this is not for any fame or, accolades. This is because I care, because I want to see this population succeed. And I know that we here in Connecticut and even at the state legislature would like to see the same. But I think for today's conversation and the work that we will do moving forward, I will submit this to you. We have to think outside of the box. We have to be willing to work with each other and really, really, really embrace collaboration in these days where funding is very scarce. And so you got to put aside your organizational identities. You still got to support your organizations, but we have to keep in mind that this is a population that, for the most part, they're voiceless. But I am so excited that we're here to talk through what are some housing options for many of the individuals that reside here in the state of Connecticut. There are other states that are doing it, and I know that the state of Connecticut can do it. So I'm really grateful to all of you here, but specifically Hartford Foundation for Public Giving. We have our Greater Hartford Reentry Council and several others around this circle that really helped us to generate the study that you have, the packet that you have before you, all of the advocacy around it. And we got an uphill battle, but I know with all the power that's around this table, we're able to do something very substantial. So again, thank you for being here, and I look forward to the conversation. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone, and good morning, Sabira and Representative McGee. And thank you for the good work that you've done to bring this group to fruition. It's clearly important work that all the folks in this room around this dais are doing. So from the Department of Housing's perspective, Connecticut is a housing first state. So what that means to us is that once someone has safe, stable, and affordable housing, all good things will come from that. And what we have seen is that housing is key to an individual's success and a family's success. And what that success means for those individuals and families who have a safe, stable, and affordable home is that they can achieve their goals. And the other important part of it is that these individuals and families put down roots in communities and they become active participants in what is their hometowns. So thank you so much for including the Department of Housing in this important discussion.
And I think there's a representative from the Department of Corrections here. They make it, yeah. Yep, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Alicia Chornaby. I'm from the Department of Corrections. However, Lauren Miller is also here from the Department of Corrections as well. She's on the parole piece. I was informed that to participate in this, so I'm happy to be here and looking forward to working with each one of you. It is very important. Housing is definitely important, and we do really want to work on that as a whole. There are so many offenders that are discharging out to nothing, no family or family that has given up on them, and it's very sad to see. I was reviewing some numbers as far as how many 211 calls we've made last year and so far this year, but that shouldn't be it. There should be more that's done, more than 211 in sober house arrangements. But hopefully we can establish something together and try to come up with a plan.
Yeah, as she said, I'm Lauren Miller. I work at Parole. Our offenders actually don't have the homelessness problem while they're on supervision, but obviously once they finish our supervision, the officers do work to get them some kind of housing established, whether they have supervision to follow with probation or if they're just end of sentence. So we are obviously here to try to help ease that transition and see whatever we can do to bridge the gap so that people don't end up homeless after they finish their incarceration time with us. So thank you.
Okay, great. So I think some of you, I'm not sure if everyone around this circle had received an email from us asking for kind of an overview about why you're here. So in the interest of time, I want everyone to give us a brief, your name and your organization, and 30 seconds about why you're here. I think it's really important to know who's sitting around the table. And for a quick second, I know personally there are a few individuals in here who have been formerly incarcerated, and I just want to say thank you for being here. I know your stories are going to be really important to us in the work that we're doing, so I just want to say thank you for being here. So I will start with Don and have you, so introduction, and Brandon will cut you off if you go too long because I'm going to be the good person here today.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Don Robinson. I'm a workforce specialist. I work for the Workplace, who is based in Bridgeport. I work out of an office in New Haven. I work directly with men and women who are coming directly out of prison. We're contracted with several work release programs, et cetera. Try to help the men and women get housing, training, education, jobs, et cetera. Just believe that everyone deserves an opportunity to work and a place to live. That's good. Okay.
Good morning. My name is Rosa Correa, and I reside in Bridgeport. I'm not currently employed since I retired 2 years ago, but I have over 15 years of working in reentry, both at Family Reentry and Career Resources. And my volunteer involvement has always led me to work with people coming out of incarceration. I took a big initiative as the chair of the Bridgeport Housing Authority many years ago. And I bring that concern to boards that I am involved with, specifically now with the United Way of Eastern Coastal Fairfield County and other initiatives. I feel that we have to look at this issue from the perspective not only of the person incarcerated, but of the family, and in particularly the children who need stability in their lives.
Good morning. I'm Holly Wazalewski. I'm the Reentry and Community Outreach Coordinator at the U.S. Attorney's Office, and I'm here to try to give some voice to the voiceless on a federal and state level because of its importance.
Good morning. My name is Bruce Bressler, and I was formerly incarcerated, and I'm a former instructor for the Pride program, which teaches inmates how to start their own business upon release from prison. So that's why I'm here. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Fanula Darby-Hudgens with the Connecticut Fair Housing Center. We're here because our organization works to fight barriers to integrated, safe, and affordable housing, and we see this as a barrier all of the time.
Hi, I'm Sarah Fox from the Connecticut Coalition to End Homelessness. We've been working on this issue for many years, and we're really, and in my role, I work closely with our 8 coordinated access networks, and I'm looking at how we can best serve those individuals who are exiting from incarceration and ensure that no one is exiting incarceration into homelessness. So we're working on refining our system every single day, and we'll take back all that we learn here.
Hi, everybody. Alicia Chornaby again. I'm here from the Department of Corrections to hear everybody's concerns and hopefully offer some support from the DOC.
Lauren Miller from Parole and Community Services, again, trying to bridge that gap from when they get off of their supervision into the community again. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Lena Rodriguez. I'm the president of CRT. I think I'm here because Brandon asked me to be here, and anything Brandon asked me to do, I will come and be here. So thank you, Brandon. CRT is a community action agency that serves the Hartford and Middlesex area. We serve close to 100,000 individuals annually. We provide wraparound services, social services to families and individuals. So everything from early care and education to senior services and housing. We do have some very, very limited housing for the reentry population. That's why I'm so happy that we're here today to talk about expanding that housing, because we certainly never have enough of it. We have been working with the reentry population for quite a long time. There's a large percentage of the people that we serve that come from the Bureau of Prisons, especially in the area of behavioral health services. So we have some services for our reentry population, but of course it's a challenge because there's holistic services that need to be provided. A lot of them we have, a lot of those services, but we cannot do it alone. And there is a lot of other services that can be wrapped around, which I'm hoping that we can all come to a plan to figure out what all of those are. So, thank you.
Good morning. My name is Fernando Betancourt. I'm the Executive Director for the San Juan Center, Inc. in Hartford, Connecticut. Why I was selected to participate here, I don't know, but I suspect it has to do with my good friend. Oh, you might be okay. That's good. I have direct and indirect experience working with the reentry population going back 29 years. Yes, I am that old. 29 years back in New Haven when I was the Department of Corrections Director working in a facility, a drug rehabilitation program in New Haven called Crossroads. And then I also worked in the General Assembly for 14 years where I dealt with the public policy issues, and now at the San Juan Center we provide these services to the same population.
Good morning again, Yvonne Klein, Commissioner of the Department of Housing for the state of Connecticut. And big picture, we're here because we believe housing is a fundamental human right.
Now I have pressure to speak really quickly because you spoke so quickly. I'm Cheryl Sharp. I'm the Deputy Director and Commission Attorney at the Commission on Human Rights and Opportunities. Our mission is to eliminate discrimination in housing and employment, credit transactions, and in places of public accommodation. I am here because we are obviously receive complaints of discrimination based on individuals who have a criminal record, and HUD issued guidance back in 2016 making it clear that it is potentially discrimination when you have blanket policies that have a discriminatory effect on certain individuals. And there was a discriminatory effect on Black and Latino people who were trying to get housing. So this is an issue that is germane to us. Also, we're working on a documentary film, Life After Imprisonment, looking at housing and employment for formerly incarcerated individuals and following 3 individuals and looking at the difficulties that center around their criminal record, and also because of the disparities in our criminal justice system are having a disproportionate impact on, again, Black and Hispanic individuals. Hopefully with providing more housing opportunity, it will lessen the discrimination across the state. So that's why we're here. Thanks.
Good morning. I'm Fernando Muñiz. I'm the CEO of Community Solutions. We operate 9 work release residential programs for the Department of Correction and the Federal Bureau of Prisons in Connecticut, serving approximately 325 individuals on a daily basis. So this is an issue, obviously, that's very important to us, and we see many of the challenges that the people that we serve face as they're nearing the end of their time with our programs, and certainly work in partnership with parole and some of the other agencies to ensure that people transition effectively to the community. But certainly housing is one of the greatest barriers that folks face, so we're glad to be here and joining this work with you.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Isabel Logan, and I happened to be at the right time, at the right place at Stop and Shop, and I came across Warner here, who invited me to come, and I'm really excited to be here. So I worked in the public defender's office for about 20 years. So I did some time in New Haven drug court as well, and then my last years I was at Hartford Juvenile Court on Broad Street. And so we've done some work together too there. Presently, right now, at Eastern in the social work department, where I'm actually one of the professors who teaches policy, and I do field works with them. So I'm preparing students to work with this population, and I'm also very interested in seeing what my expertise in the field can help provide some kind of solution or guidance. So that's why I'm here.
Good morning. I'm Jamie Bell. I'm the Executive Director of Greater Hartford Legal Aid. Our mission is to use the law and legal tools to increase safety and opportunity for people living in poverty. I think I'm interested in participating in this process, particularly probably for identifying and advocating for policy reforms with regard to public housing options for this population, many of whom are our clients. Most of our work for the reentry population and people with criminal records has to do with pardons and employment, but we also have a very robust housing practice within Greater Hartford Legal Aid, so it's relevant to that work as well. And thanks for inviting me.
Good morning. My name is Steve Delella, and I am also from the Department of Housing. And I'd just like to reiterate what Commissioner Klein said, that we at the Department of Housing do believe that housing is a fundamental human right. In addition, we have made some great successes on reducing homelessness, and I think we can use some of the lessons we have learned there to transfer this over to a reentry population. We've done a couple of interesting small pilots that we can probably explain a little bit more about the reentry population, one with DOC and one that we're just getting off the ground with CSSD, which I think has some great potential here. So I'm looking forward to this and see what we can do to expand on those, possibly, as well as some other alternatives that we'd be happy to assist with.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Sue Gunderman. I am the Interim Director for Reentry Services for the City of Hartford. I am also the Chairperson of the Greater Hartford Reentry Council, so I want to thank everybody for being here today. It's great. Brandon, Subera, thank you so much. Why am I here? Wearing many, many hats today. One of housing with the City of Hartford, I've witnessed it firsthand, people coming through my door with no place to go. Officer Barrett works, some of you may know him, at City Hall, working closely with our homeless population, and it's tough to see somebody who's struggling, walking through your door, living under a bridge for several months. We can't have that. We cannot have that here in our state. So I'm here to make sure we move that issue forward and get people housing as soon as they leave DOC. The other hat that I'm wearing, and I'll let Beth tell us a little bit more about, with working closely with Community Partners in Action. For many of you may have heard, we're going to open a little reentry welcome center here in the City of Hartford, coming in September, mind you. And one of the greatest issues we're concerned about is housing after folks come home from the Department of Corrections. So we're going to see it firsthand right on our doorstep. And so we're here to make sure people find a place to be. So thank you for inviting me.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Zachary McEwen. I'm a legislative associate with the Connecticut Conference of Municipalities. CCM represents most of the towns and cities in Connecticut. Initially, what comes to mind from CCM's perspective are mechanisms to reduce the property tax burden to reduce home prices. So we're happy to be part of this working group, and we look forward to working with you all.
Hi, my name is Amy Epler-Epstein. I'm an attorney at New Haven Legal Assistance, where I wear two different hats that are both related to this committee. One is I've been for over 30 years a housing attorney representing tenants in all sorts of housing situations and housing applicants. And the other is I co-teach a reentry clinic with Yale Law School students that work specifically on reentry issues, which includes housing issues. So I have, in both those capacities, lots of clients who face the issues that we're talking about here on a daily basis. And we both represent individual clients and have worked on policy issues. We've done a lot of work with the Housing Authority of New Haven on their admission criteria and their practices, and some other subsidized housing places in New Haven. So I'm excited to bring that to a state level and see how we can work on that. I also just wanted to make reference to one issue, a subpopulation here that I think we should talk about, which is sex offenders and the sex offender registry. I've been a part of a multi-year effort to try to change the registry, and the Sentencing Commission has done some great work on that, and hopefully that will eventually become a change in our laws. But I think that is a particular subgroup of this population that if you think you've got it hard finding housing when you have a criminal record, try being on the sex offender registry. It just gets harder and harder. So I'd love to have that be part of the agenda of our discussion as well, because I think there are some options for us as a state how to deal with that.
Good morning, everyone. My name's Judy McBride, and I'm Director of Grants and Partnership Investments at the Hartford Foundation for Public Giving. I want to begin by thanking Representative McGee and Sabira for really bringing us all together. The Hartford Foundation has really been pleased to be an integral partner with all of you in addressing reentry issues for a very long time. We've funded programs that assisted folks incarcerated in around their parenting skills and really making sure that they stay connected with their families. I'm here today. I think my life has come full circle. I worked at the U.S. Justice Department when we first birthed the idea of reentry, and I was the aide that got the assignment that what are we doing around aftercare? That's what it was called there, and we thought that made it seem like an afterthought when in fact it's been reentry and recidivism within 3 years of being released has been one of the most persistent criminal justice issues of our time. I also worked at the U.S. Housing and Urban Development Department, so I know that housing is a key issue, especially access to government-assisted housing, and to ensure that folks don't have to be invisible to live with their families. So I welcome being part of this group.
Hi, my name is Terry Nowakowski. I'm the Chief Operating Officer for the Partnership for Strong Communities, and our mission is to end homelessness and increase affordable housing in the state of Connecticut. And we do that through meeting with legislators at the local level and on the federal level to really look at the funding, to preserve what we have and also to increase what we have, because I think what I've heard around the table today, and probably will hear more, is that there just isn't enough. And we also, through the Reaching Home campaign, we work on a collective impact model in which we work with over 200 partners statewide to look at the intersectionality of the work that we do and see where we can perhaps make improvements. One of those committees is a criminal justice task force that Mimi Haley and myself co-chair. We've been meeting with folks from DOC, CSSD, and providers around the state, and we're trying to solve this problem just like you all are, and I've been doing this work for a lot of years. I'm a social worker, and it always starts with the basic needs, and a home is something that everybody needs, and really that's really the place where it all begins. Thanks.
Good morning. My name is Jessica Olander. I'm the executive director of CONNARO, which is the Connecticut chapter of the National Association of Housing and Redevelopment Officials. We work very closely here in the state with the Department of Housing and Commissioner Klein. I would just like to echo those sentiments. Supply does not meet demand here in Connecticut. We're aware of that problem, so I'm happy to have a seat at the table and with this working group. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Mimi Haley. I'm with the Connecticut Coalition to End Homelessness, and yes, I co-chair the Criminal Justice and Housing really Task Force with Terry Nowakowski. And one of my roles, I'm Deputy Director at the Coalition, but one of my roles has been to bring technical assistance and training across the state for providers that are working in the homeless sector. And what we're really hoping to be able to do is bring some of our best practices that have proven to be successful to CSSD and DOC, in particular things like shelter diversion, unfortunately called diversion, which gets a little confusing, but shelter diversion, rapid rehousing, some of our coordinated access practices around that, and really working on that reentry piece, the pre-release piece in particular. We have some beginnings of work that we're doing with DOC around discharge planning to really kind of review that and look at that. And there was a quote the other day that I think is really important, but that, you know, reentry planning begins on day one, and that just really resonates with us in the housing world, because I think the sooner we begin working on those housing plans, the more successful the clients will be. And yes, thank you. Happy to be here.
Good morning. My name is Beth Hines. I too have two hats here today. I am the Chief Operating Officer for Community Partners in Action. and I'm also the chair of the Greater Waterbury Reentry Council. So with both hats, I see that the issue of housing and homelessness is significant for the population that we serve. In addition to a lack of resources in terms of housing, there's also a lack of finances to be able to come up with a security deposit, first and last month's rent. So I think in addition to talking about the supply and the demand, we also have to talk about how we can get people into housing and then also be able to sustain themselves. Some of the CPA runs transitional houses in both Waterbury and Hartford and a work release program, and there's nothing more disheartening than seeing someone come to the end of their stay with us and have to leave to go to a shelter. So I'm here for those reasons. I appreciate the invite. I look forward to helping to be part of the solution. Thank you.
I'm Sandy Lamonaco. I'm formerly incarcerated person. I work for the ACLU Smart Justice Campaign, and I'm here today to do anything I can to bring justice to the hundreds of thousands of formerly incarcerated folks in our state and come up with solutions to the basic human rights of housing. I was homeless myself a few times, but I also, a year ago, after having this job and extending my higher education, still was struggling with finding housing. So this is very real. I don't wear the hats of being black and brown, so we want to make sure that we keep that voice in the room, and I'll do anything I can. Thank you for having me here.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Patrick Fallon. I am the Director of Community Justice for the Connection Incorporated. We service over 2,000 individuals who are involved in the community justice system. Within that, we have 7 work release programs, and I have a outpatient, excuse me, I'm not feeling too good today, an outpatient sex offender treatment program. So I do think that's a very important subgroup to address. I also probably wear more than one hat here because of the work that's being done by people in this room. It's safe for me to say that I am formerly incarcerated, and I know what it's like to get your life on track, have a good job, and not be able to rent. It's truly frustrating. I was fortunate enough to have a support system to help me through that, but many of the people that we service do not have that support system, and you know, they go through the programs and we instill hope, and so many times at the end of the program we see things turn hopeless because they can't find housing. So, you know, I'm here looking to do whatever I can do to help address this.
Good morning. My name is Whitney Parra, and I'm a fellow at the Commission of Equity and Opportunity.
I'm Denise Drummond. I'm the Public Information Officer for the Commission on Equity and Opportunity, and I work with Warner, Sabira, and Clarissa.
Good morning. My name is Werner Ollanadel. I am also a staff for the Commission on Equity and Opportunity, and I wanted to mention to Subira and to Representative Brandon McGee that we have a number of other stakeholders that are not here today that will be participating in the upcoming events, just in case. And we have a number of interns and students from Yale University that are going to be providing staffing assistance to the working group.
Earl, I think you came in after everybody introduced themselves.
Right next to me is Donald Robinson. He's a co-chair with me on the Greater New Haven Reentry Roundtable, and he works with Career Resources and trying to gain employment and training for individuals that are formerly incarcerated. So I wanted to make sure that you were aware of his presence. My name is Earl Bloodworth, and I am the interim director for Project Fresh Start for the City of New Haven, which is one of the reentry programs. I'm also the program director for the Warren Kimball Reentry Project, and we work with individuals that are coming home anywhere from 3 to 12 months before they get released with the Warren Kimball Reentry Project. And in regards to Project Fresh Start, which has an open door policy for individuals that are coming home from prison, or if you've ever been incarcerated, which is located in City Hall in the city of New Haven. And we get approximately anywhere from visits per month, 150 to about 200 people per month. Almost a third of that, if not more sometimes, are people seeking housing, whether it's a woman with child or a father with child. We have individuals that are homeless most of the times, and it's a struggle trying to find housing for individuals. One, in regards to them being formerly incarcerated. Two, in regards to there being enough housing stock or various stock to meet different people's needs, such as single room occupancy or housing for males with children. So there are a lot of issues that we need to contend with and look at this from a multitude of angles to figure out how we can get people stable housing, because we try a lot of different things with different programs, just like Mr. Fallon talked about, and working with individuals and connections. It's really disheartening when you have somebody who is successful in their programming and meeting their goals, but at the end of the program, they don't have a place to go, which can be, destabilizing from all the progress that they've made. And so I want to thank everybody that's here, and thank Sabira and Representative McGee for having me here as well.
Okay, thank you. So just a little bit of housekeeping. The goal for this working group is to meet monthly. We have to submit a report according to the statute that you have in front of you by January 1st, so at the beginning of the next legislative session, to the General Assembly, to the Housing Committee, and probably Planning and Development. So we hope to be able to meet monthly, every month until, I think, even down to December. I just want to see, this time of day seems to work fine. I think we want to meet here. I was just saying it to Brandon. I think we might want to think about doing some community listening sessions as a part of this work, because we're here, it's easy for us to come here. I think it's much harder for those who were probably former incarcerated or individuals doing a lot of the work in the community to take time out of their day to come to Hartford for a 10 a.m. meeting. So we also want to, it's going to be really hard to get real work done sitting around this circle. There's a lot of us, and there are more people who are interested in being here. So we want to think about setting up some working groups that will meet either in person or over the phone. Someone from CEO will be able to be available for each one of those working group meetings. So I'm not an expert here, so I want to start off by throwing out I would love to hear some suggestions, and just raise your hand and we'll call on you, for what do we think the working group should be working on. I have some ideas, but I'd love to hear from everyone who's sitting around the circle and actually doing the work. I think we want to set up 3-4 max to actually think about what are the hot topic issues, or what are some of the things that we can propose as a part of the recommendations. I do want to say, our state is in a financial crisis, but when people want to find money for things, they find money for things. So I don't want us to not be big and bold because we're thinking about the state's financial situation. I think one of the things we've done is no matter what, we find money for incarceration, right? We find money to put people in prison. So I think we have to be clear about helping them after they leave should be a part of what we do as a state. So whatever we're putting forward, don't constrain ourselves and say our state's in a financial situation so we can't make recommendations. Have it be the Brandon McGee's and the legislators of the world who then tells us they don't have money for it. So I think that's really important. I don't want us to constrain ourselves in the beginning process. Let's really think about, what do we need to do to make this population successful? So I'll throw it out there, and if anyone has any suggestions for what should we be doing and what should be some of the committees that we should have.
I definitely think we need to have focus groups with people this directly affects. And those are those coming out of incarceration and dealing with this issue. So many of us sitting around the table have houses that we run, whether they're halfway houses or transitional houses. So I think potentially a committee that really works with getting the information directly from the individuals this impacts would be helpful. maybe, for example, we come up with a host of questions that we want answers to, and for example, Fernando within your organization, me within mine, and some of the others that have houses, the connection, we meet with those clients and we talk with them about what their struggles are and how we can help them. I think that we miss a huge opportunity if we don't include them in the conversation.
Subida. I understand the charge of the special act, and I agree that we should concentrate on housing alternatives. However, I have served in this kind of commissions and work groups before, and I think that this is a good opportunity to start looking at other systems and make a comprehensive narrative in terms of recommendations, because education and a number of other alternative systems impact the lives of the individuals who are incarcerated in the first place. So I think that instead of being reactive, we should also be proactive in terms of prevention.
When I look at our system, and I've been working and talking to the Department of Corrections and CSSD, and also providers that do housing all over the state, one of the biggest disconnects I see is in our continuum of services. And so we have a bifurcated system, and sort of looking at how our reentry system as a whole can serve those individuals who are coming into our communities. So whether it is the housing services served through DOC, through CSSD, or through any of the provider organizations, or even our sober houses, it's really unclear where people, if you end up in a transitional housing program and then it's at the end of your 90 days, like what services have been put in place for you? And how do we make sure that we're building these connections amongst all agencies? So I think that that's an area of work that we need to look into.
Hi, my name is Bruce Bressler. I just want to share my story real quick. I formerly was incarcerated. I did 7 years, straight day for day. And upon my discharge planning, I was disqualified for a halfway house. I was disqualified for parole, and I had to excuse me. I had a discharge with nowhere to go, and that took a toll on me. My first day out, I stayed in a hotel. Second day out, I had found a friend's house to stay in. A couple of days I stayed here, stayed there. Eventually, I ended up staying with my father, and I slept on the floor. And I was able to get inside City Hall and work with Barry Diamond, who was teaching inmates how to start their own program. Start their own business. And I became an instructor after graduating that. So I was teaching inmates how to start their own business upon release from incarceration, which I thought was a great idea. While I was doing my 7 years, I took different college courses. I took business marketing. I took interpersonal skills, human behavior, and I came up with a program myself. And instead of going out and doing my own thing, I just worked with Barry. And from there was funding that got cut, so we were unable to finish the program and continue it. Upon that situation, I resorted back to going back to the streets. And I was formerly just incarcerated for that. I'm currently in a halfway house as we speak. I leave September 18th. I have nowhere to go, so I'm going through that issue. I think that the real issue, and I'm a violent offender. There's not a lot of opportunities for violent offenders. When a violent offender, you get denied parole, you get denied halfway houses. Nobody really wants to deal with you. So I think that's a big problem within the DOC and the reentry issues. I think that job readiness inside DOC is a big issue. I think that teaching inmates how to get a job and how to be a job is very important. If you could come out and be a contribution to your community and help the economy by creating jobs, that's going to release some of the pressure on recidivism. So that's my story. Thank you for being. Thank you for letting me be here. Thank you.
I had a few suggestions for potential subcommittees, I guess, and the first one would be in line with what you were saying. It would be community engagement. I think that that's important. I think that the most poignant stories, so that we can understand what all the issues are, come from the people who have experienced those issues. Secondly, I think finance and funding services could be a subcommittee, because without finding finances or additional funding, we're going to have housing insecurity. That maybe that group can look at RAP vouchers and making them specified for individuals who are formerly incarcerated, and having two factors, and putting those two factors on the vouchers, and having a percentage of those vouchers be specified for formerly incarcerated individuals with either mental health issue or drug addiction, or we could come up with whatever the list of specifications should be. Thirdly, I think we could have a committee or subcommittee regarding housing accessibility, because that's what we're all here to discuss. But there could be some really more in-depth discussions that could be had with a smaller group. And then lastly, I would think like a research and development committee to look at some of the issues of employment, and what some of the issues of discrimination, what are leading people into these housing insecurity situations that go beyond the fact that they have a criminal record. So those are 4 suggestions I have.
The one thing I think we need is to have, and whether this falls onto research and development, or a research committee, or a legislative committee, to look at legislation that currently exists that may be barriers to this population to securing housing. So for part of the change I think that we want to make will also include perhaps a piece of legislation to help this population.
I'd like to really commend you for your suggestion to have listening sessions. I think this is critically important to engage those people that are outside the circle. And by those, I mean the business community, the faith-based community, landlord groups, or realtors. They play a vital role in decision-making, and we need to get them. And also, someone was mentioning development and support for the group. Fraternal organizations such as the Lions, Rotary clubs need to really know about this work, and probably have some of the members of this working group attend their weekly or monthly whatever sessions they have, be on their agenda, so that this becomes an agenda item for the nonprofits and for all these other groups that I mentioned before. Thank you.
Thank you. So my suggestion, one of my suggestions, is that we really look at work that has already been done, because I know a lot of groups around this table, a lot of advocacy groups, a lot of research groups have done a lot of work around this topic, and I would not like for us to spend time revisiting, researching something that already has been done and researched. So I love the fact that we have Yale students here that are going to, be helping us in terms of with, I don't know if it's collecting data or analyzing data, but I think that one of the things that we should do is look at the different organizations that are in this work and are predominantly in this work, and to see what work has been done already, collect that information and have it for the working groups. So that's one thing. The second thing I was thinking about, if we're focusing on housing specifically, one of the issues is, of course, the wraparound services, right? Wraparound services is one thing, but actually getting a person that has been incarcerated inside an apartment, it's very, very difficult. So even having a VASH voucher doesn't mean that landlord is going to let that person in that apartment. So the question is whether or not we have housing stock, right? Whether we have housing stock that we can look at that's kind of like a dedicated building, and we can wrap all kinds of services around that, including sweat equity, kind of like different kinds of work programs, connections to other work programs, to give people an opportunity to work living in that dedicated place, where it's friendly to all kinds of services and to folks that want to help folks be successful. I mean, we've got a lot of businesses around here, like Bears for one, that really hire reentry people that we can partner with. But I think one of the major factors is getting dedicated housing that we can work around, because that's the elephant in the room.
So I want to echo the need to really take stock of what's in place and make sure that we understand what's working and what's not working in order to make the case for more support around housing. You know, the obvious question will be what's needed. So I want to be sure we get at that. I also just want to say really figuring out how to engage the public to debunk some of the stereotypes around this population. Landlords will not open their doors and their hearts until they see this population as we do, as human beings with the same hopes and goals. So I would hope that maybe a public awareness effort would also take place.
I also think that, and I think Mimi mentioned it around discharge planning, is that we can identify so many things, but we really have to have a common language if we're really going to be successful. So the common language would be early on in the prison system, having an assessment tool that identifies the need early on, and then starting that process early on. I think what we know is that we have a shortage of resources, and we probably have a lot of entities that want to help. But unless we started early on and make that a process that's consistent and everyone knows, I don't think we're going to really get to our end. So I think common language and common assessment tool.
I'm thinking it might make sense to have a working group, as Commissioner Klein was mentioning too, I think on legislative options and maybe regulation state policy options, because there's a lot of things within our existing state agencies that we could relook at and think about whether they're meeting, helping us meet this goal. And similarly, just off the top of my head, I don't know what the answer is, but we could certainly ask the question, should our fair housing laws be changed so that, as Cheryl Sharp was saying, right now it's illegal to discriminate if you have a blanket policy that has a disparate impact, but we could certainly consider changing the law that says you can't look at somebody's criminal record in housing looking back more than X years, or you can't consider it unless it's violent. I mean, there are lots of options that we could think about legislatively, and so I would recommend a subcommittee that could at least sort of look at both regulations and legislation and help us set out what the questions are, that we could then come back to the group to talk about what those options are. And the other thing that people talked about that was about funding, I think that's a really good funding and resources. So, the idea of giving, I think, just looking at your employment report about the financial incentives that you give to people to employ people who have criminal records, you could certainly do similar financial incentives for housing and private housing, for example, and so those options as well.
I just want to add two things. One is, everybody's kind of talked about this, but that pre-release piece I think is so important. I did a training recently with split sentence probation officers working with folks that were still incarcerated on different discharge planning, and actually had them draw pictures of the barriers that they face for working with incarcerated individuals through the video conferencing. And some of the things that came up was really I think important information. So I think making sure that we're also listening to the folks that are doing the work directly with folks in DOC and on probation, that's just a really important knowledge base that collectively can really, I think, tell a lot of things, and we came out with some recommendations based on some of the insights from that we have came out in our committee. So that's one thing. The second thing is data, and that maybe is perhaps naturally going to be in the research and development, but I think that the state of data right now on housing needs of people being released, that we don't have great data statewide on this. We just did a survey, actually I worked with Sarah on this, of our shelters, and DOC was really, I think, very open and encouraging for us to ask, how many people do you have that are being dropped off at the shelter from Department of Correction? Because, you know, we don't, that's a hard number sometimes to actually understand. So knowing what those numbers are, I think, can also help on the housing and homeless service side to understand what the needs are. And I think that we still have a ways to go on that.
So before, I just wanted to, since I remembered it, if you have any reports in your organization that you think we should be aware of, please send them to us, because I think there might be information out there that we don't know about, and I think it would be very helpful if there's anything that you have that you think is relevant to this, you can send it to us, and then we can kind of put it together.
Okay, so just to Sabira's point, so I don't forget, so I appreciate that, Representative. As I'm listening to folks, maybe we would like to think about what is it that this group needs to know? So we've already identified some things. So perhaps presentations from, relevant organizations. So perhaps DOC could do a presentation on what's already being done in prison, prep release, things like that. Do you know what I'm saying? Yeah. So that the group can all start out with the same knowledge base. It's always a lofty goal, but that's what we're going for. And again, we certainly could present on housing, the funding we have, and then perhaps the Fair Housing Center could talk about the barriers and, really target this. So those are my three ideas, but this, I think, could be perhaps done in the next meeting in September, and it also serves as an education piece. I noticed that CTN is filming this, so it's not only education for us and a stepping off point for our group, but also to be out in the public and create this education, because I also heard about that. So those are my suggestions, and I know that you all will think about how to best organize who comes and participates in these presentations. And then, a nice PowerPoint is always easier for all of us to digest rather than reports, although we enjoy the reports, so thank you.
I work in outreach and education for the Fair Housing Center, so I would be happy to work in any of those efforts. And I wanted to kind of echo and reiterate two things that I've heard around the table. I think the need for outreach is so incredibly important. It continues to inform my work daily. But I also really wanted to echo Amy's suggestion for a look at state legislative practices, specifically around the practices and policies that housing providers employ when they look at criminal backgrounds. So one of the things we see at the center, and I can explain this in greater detail when we do these presentations, is that housing providers are using large companies to do background checks, meaning they're not doing the individualized assessments that are required by HUD. So they're just getting back a check mark that says presence of criminal history, with no assessment of the individual done. So I think that those practices and policies of housing providers need to be investigated.
So that kind of leads to my point of coming up. So I used to own a home, and a lot of property owners and investors don't really know like how to go about looking at a criminal record or what to look for, anything of that sort. So addressing that with maybe some legislation or a measurement tool and having it become required, kind of similar to like the lead-based paint, something that's very short, very easy to understand, easy to read, hopefully. And I know, like, you know, incarceration is a public health crisis, so like framing it as like this needs to be done, and, you know, hopefully people won't complain about it. But I think the measurement tool, you know, needs to kind of include formerly incarcerated folks so that formerly incarcerated folks are not excluded out of that.
The other thing that I started to think about is recidivism rates. And I think Bruce mentioned how his inability to attain employment led him back into incarceration. And so as we were thinking about data, I heard someone, I think, was it Judy? Did you mention data? I think that would also be important. I know that agencies such as CSSD collects data, and I'm sure that there are other agencies that collect data, and it'll be interesting to see if recidivism rates have increased or decreased due to housing. That would be important.
The Office of Policy and Management has volunteered to present for us as well. I forgot to mention that. So they could give us a kind of overview of where we are, and I think that would be very helpful. I think we should do the presentations at the next meeting, actually. I think that's a good idea. I'll mention what happened here today so they can put it together in a way that will work for all of us.
I was taking some notes over the weekend on some of the options we have. I think we should look into, since we give incentives to companies and business owners on hiring felons, I think maybe we should come up with an idea for incentives for landlords. You know, come up with some incentives for them for housing ex-offenders. So that was just one idea I came up with. So.
I was just looking at this Office of Legislative Research report that you gave us here, and there's actually a lot of information in here. That's all the things that we've been talking about and trying to gather up. There's a lot in here already. That's a really good place to start. So I didn't even know this existed, and I thank you for providing us. I think that can be a really helpful summary for us.
So there were a few points I wanted to make. One is that the Commission, as a state agency, has statewide data on complaints of discrimination that have been filed as a result of disparate impact, where people are claiming that they're not getting housed because they have a criminal record. I think that data is very important as well. Those are the individuals who know to come forward and actually file a complaint of discrimination. I would agree with the legal services that the legislation piece and Commissioner Klein is so important. Part of the issue, I think, is that landlords are not educated about what the law says currently. There are things in place in the law currently that would prohibit some of the conduct that is actually occurring. But maybe there needs to be a fact sheet similar to the one that is now posted on the Commission's website that advises landlords about when they purchase a multifamily home, that these things would be discriminatory if you engage in this conduct. And prior to a couple of years ago, that wasn't a fact sheet, that wasn't there, but that was some legislation that was passed that has helped to inform landlords, and we've seen positive outcomes as a result of it. In addition to that, because it is the landlords who are refusing to accept individuals who are formerly incarcerated into their whatever type of housing that they have available, some training in addition to the fact sheet for landlords, I think would be good, that we could reach out to associations of landlords so that some of the stigmas can be broken down, which is where I think that there's some like intersectionality between the community engagement working group that we're going to have, or subcommittee potentially that we're going to have, and defining community as being formerly incarcerated people as well as the landlords who have the housing, because until those stigmas are broken down, people are just going to feel as though it's not safe, or whatever implicit bias that they have about certain groups of people. So I think it's critical, the legislative part of it, I think the education part of it, and the training for landlords, so that our agency will also be willing to be a part of the presentation, because I think we have data to present as well. And we do a lot of, the Connecticut Fair Housing Center actually files some of their cases with our agency, because in housing you have a private right of action. You can go into court, or you can file with the administrative agency, and the cases would be processed through our agency. So I think that a big picture look is important, and then honing in on some of the individual cases is important.
Good morning. I think I just want to share this so the whole group benefits. I was out with a client Monday, and we were looking at housing, and I glazed over one of the leases. This is in East Haven. I just want to share a little bit. First, I want to share their fair housing statement. South Oxford Management is committed to compliance with all federal, state, local housing laws. It is our policy to comply with all laws prohibiting discrimination, including those that prohibit discrimination, race, color, religion, national origin, sex, family status, disability. Okay, fast forward. We get down to criminal history. A criminal background screening will be conducted for all applicants, including felony and misdemeanor convictions and charges. The following offenses, including deferred convictions, charges, and sex offender registrants, will result in automatic denial. Crimes against person involving assault, homicide, kidnapping, sex-related, felony conviction within 50 years, felony conviction within 50 years, and charges pending trial 5 years, misdemeanor convictions within 10 years, and charges pending trial within 5 years, and it keeps going on. The gentleman that I took to see the apartment was 35 years old. He's going to die before he's eligible to live in that place. Okay, again, this is in East Haven, 510 Main Street. Okay, this is what's really out here. This is real. I can pass it around. That's it.
Yeah, someone else say something, because I don't think I have the appropriate words for to respond.
Is that even legal?
Last 50 years, it will go into automatic denial.
I don't see how that could be legal.
I think it's also a lack of illegal. I'm sorry. I think it's also a lack of education. So, for example, someone who is a sex offender has a probation officer. They have other guidelines. Some people are told, you can't be within 50 feet or whatever of a child. You can't. So they have other guidelines that are being taken care of in that end. So when you're adding that to a housing piece, it just adds another layer that really needs to be addressed.
I have a document to be passed around, and it is the HUD issued guidance in 2016, which makes it illegal to have a blanket policy excluding individuals such as that. So I want to actually ask for a copy of that, because the commission has the power to do commission-initiated complaints of discrimination as well when there is evidence showing that something is per se discriminatory. So what has to happen, I think, is some of these things just need to be brought to the attention of the appropriate agency so that some action can be taken, because those statements are unconscionable.
This is unrelated, although that is deeply troubling. I'm just thinking in terms of like low-hanging fruit, if we're thinking about some certain subpopulations who we are really, really, truly concerned about, such as end-of-sentence individuals that are exiting, or those individuals who are exiting incarceration that are level 4s and 5s, and are exiting into homelessness. And so there are certain subpopulations that, when we know when people are on probation or parole, they have some supports that are coming out with them into the community, although it's still very difficult to access housing. But there's a real concern for those people at end of sentence who have very little support when they're coming into our communities.
I think I want to add that, having the separation of violent versus nonviolent offender is very harmful because about 80% of people inside have a violent offense. Most are misdemeanors. And so if we're just writing people off, that we want to be very clear that you can't just write somebody off because they have a violent offense.
Yep, I agree with you wholeheartedly. I think as a society, we have started to feel better about ourselves because we have decided that we are reforming nonviolent offenders and they have access to a whole host of things, right? And when we think about incarceration, we think about those who get incarcerated. For many individuals, because we don't educate them, and when you plea out and what you plead down to, and when someone says you can plead down to a misdemeanor, not understanding that if you plead down to a violent misdemeanor, it would have probably been better to go for the nonviolent felony. There's not enough information out there for those who are in contact with the criminal justice system. So I agree 100%. I think whatever we're gonna do, let me back up. The reason we're here is because we haven't decided as a society what the role of prison is, right? If we knew what role prison was going to play in society, then we wouldn't have all of these issues after you left prison. Because the whole point in going to prison is to get you to the place where you will be better, I guess, coming out, in my head. So once you leave incarceration, you should be done with everything that is related to that offense that puts you in incarceration, right? So if you're going to have the scarlet letter that's going to follow you for the rest of your life, why get out of prison? I think we have to really think about reforming the system. And I know that's not what our goal is here today, but big picture, we have to think about what our criminal justice system does and how it affects people and how it affects families. So the reason, okay, so you've served time and then for the next 50 years you can't live anywhere. What's the purpose of all of that? So I think we really have to start thinking about the system itself and what are we doing to these individuals. And it's a system of inequity that creates a lot of the inequities that we see in the criminal justice system that starts way back when, which is why I like your recommendation of broadening, but I think we have to be careful not to go too broad. Because if you leave it up to Brandon and I, will tackle the world of issues in our 6-month process and get bogged down. But I really think when we think about this work, a lot of it has to do with we haven't really decided what we're doing with these individuals. So how prison works in the United States, a lot of it, is deeply rooted in what happened after slavery and how we, put certain people in certain places. And we have to be aware of that. I don't think I have to tell this room about how individuals get to certain places and what happens. But I think in this work, we have to be aware of the inequities that's looming over this entire system. I think in Connecticut, we have, even though we've reduced our prison population by a lot, our racial disparity is exactly the same place where it has always been. So none of the reforms that we've made have actually had any real impact in the disproportionate impact of minority communities. And we have to be honest about that, and we have to be real when we take on this work and really understand that it's Black and brown families that are affected by the policies that the legislature has created, that our state departments have done. There's so much history that looks at where we are today, that I think we all have to be aware of that. And that should be, I think, in the back of our minds when we look forward and really think about that. When we're proposing policies, there are many times in this work when something on the face looks amazing. And then when you just peel one layer back, and you start to think about, wait, you're saying we should do this, but how is this going to impact this family in this situation? And I think there's a lot of, when we're doing this work and moving forward, I just want that to be in the back of all of our minds about the racial impact and the disproportionate impact for minority families that this entire work is rooted in. And I think I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that coming from the Commission on Equity and Opportunity. I really want us to be aware of that. And really, by making a real impact here, we have the most segregated state in the country, and we have the largest wealth gap in the country. That says a lot. And we have the largest achievement gap in the country, right? So that's a trifecta that they all just go together, and it's not by accident, right? many of the lines Commissioner Klein and I know that were drawn during redlining kind of still exist today, where people of color live in certain places and those people who are not of color live in certain places. How we police in the places where people of color live. Our entire system in the state is built on inequity. So I want to make sure that we're moving forward in doing this work. We're doing it intentionally, and we know why we're here and why we're doing it. Why I'm sitting here, and I can't speak for Representative McGee, but I'm going to say why he's sitting here. I should say, but I'm going to, because this affects people that look like him and myself in great numbers, and we want to make sure that moving forward as a state, we're doing the right thing, and we're making sure that we're being intentional in doing the right thing. And someone new came in who's sitting at the table. I'd love for him to introduce himself.
Hi, my name is Louis Reed. I'm the National Organizing Director for Cut 50.
How you doing again? I think that a big problem it is the housing, but what we need to do is really tackle the problem before the housing happens, because if the inmate gets housing, you still have underlying issues that need to be dealt with that's going to help them maintain that housing. So whether it's substance abuse, whether it's mental health issues, I think that maybe DOC needs to integrate some programs that are more aggressive on changing the value system of the inmate and teaching them how to be a contribution to society and maintain housing, as well as becoming a great employee or becoming an entrepreneur themselves. I mean, we could fix the problem on housing, but that's just covering up. You know, we need to work on really the cause of the issue and help them maintain their housing once they get out there. So, you know, substance abuse and mental health is a real big issue when it comes to that. So.
Thank you. A lot has been said, and I've been taking a lot of notes here. But I think a lot of the recommendations on subcommittees could really be folded into probably 3 or 4 committees. I just want to add one more, and forgive me if you all have already mentioned it or recommended it. We have quite a few attorneys around this table, and some of you who do work in the legal field, but from an advocacy perspective. Perhaps we should have a committee to focus on, you know, the types of laws and legal language that many of the individuals re-entering the community probably can educate us on, but with your legal background, provide some support and perhaps even recommendations as these individuals are moving through the process. So that could probably be a recommendation as well, or be a part of one of the 3 subcommittees. So I'll turn it back over to Sabera. She's like, why wrap up? Okay, cool. After she told me that she's going to speak for me. So, you know, in the interest of time, I know we were going to run to about noon, but I'm going to wrap up because I know some of you have other meetings. But before we do so, are there any other comments, recommendations, things that we should consider? Oh, and we have some, I know that gentleman. You can introduce yourself if you like.
My name is Edward Andrews. You know, everybody, former incarcerated, 22 years. You talk about housing. I can identify so much with it because when I came home, it took me like at least 11 months to get an apartment. And then apartments they wanted to send me to, for me to rent out. It wasn't even worth it, you know, but I ain't gonna keep you long. I know you about to wrap it up. I'll be here for the next meeting, if God willing. And thank you.
Well, thank you. So if anyone would like to give any last minute thoughts or recommendations or things that we completely forgotten about, feel free to say it now. Or don't say it at all. No. I'll turn it over to you, Warner. But I think it's important, the listening tours, and I know, you know, Rosa, you mentioned that as well. These listening tours will happen, and I think we should begin thinking about where in the state we should strategically have these conversations. I will also do a better job inviting additional folks, policymakers from the other side of the aisle to be a part of this conversation as well. Invitations were sent out to all of our colleagues, but I think it's important that we have all voices around the table. Just know that we'll be looking for many of you to help facilitate those listening tours, and perhaps even recommend to us some individuals on the ground level that you think could add value to kicking off many of these conversations throughout the state. It's cool for me to talk, but it's also, I think it's even better to hear from those that have been incarcerated, those that are working in the field versus policymakers talking. So just keep that in the forefront as we move forward. Warner?
I just want to real quick thank Nicole, who's helped us with this work. She's an intern from UConn who's been working with us this summer. You may have, I think you've gotten an email from her. And then Clarissa Cardone is our administrative assistant at the commission. I just want to thank them for, I think almost my whole staff is here today. This is how much I love reentry and love doing this work. And then Werner is the point of contact, just so everyone knows. He's been sending out the email. So if you have anything, not that you can't reach out to me, but just to centralize, it's easier to go through him, and I'll have him wrap up at the end. I just want to say thank you to everyone who came. Sorry. I really, really, really appreciate everyone taking time out of their day and being here. This is really important work, and it's great that we have so many people here today. Oh, Beth, real quick.
Had an idea in terms of the groups in pockets of the state. Maybe one of the places that we could start are the reentry roundtables. I think there's 8 of us now. So it might be a good place to start in terms of the conversations that you're looking to have, that we're looking to have.
And I wanted to add, in terms of the conversation that we had about presentations, that we're expecting to get a researcher coming in from Washington, D.C. She's represents the National Council of State Legislatures, and she's going to provide a presentation to the working group that will try to provide sort of a national context in terms of best practices, programs, legislation that we as a committee, as a group, should look into. Subir also already mentioned the fact that OPM will also be providing a presentation, and that will help us put the conversation into context, to give the overall status of the conversation that we're having, so that we can begin to divide into subgroups and finish our work in December. So if you have any recommendations, if anybody want to chair a subcommittee, one of the 3 or 4 that we mentioned, send me an email, and we can certainly put you at the on the leadership on those subgroups. My email is Werner, WERNER, dot my last name, which is OYANADEL, at cga.ct.gov.
And I think Brandon and I will take I have pages and pages of notes too that we'll try to consolidate all the recommendations. I think they fit into 3 or 4 boxes. And then we'll send out the committees, and do we want volunteers for chair? If no one volunteers, we'll end up picking people. So better to volunteer if you're interested in chairing. So we'll kind of coordinate this, and then probably in the next week or so, or week or 2, we'll get that out. And we'll probably, I think, keep the meetings towards the beginning of the month. What day is the week is today? Wednesday? I think Wednesdays work well. And then, so we'll try to come up with a meeting schedule so we all kind of know what we're doing moving forward for the rest of the summer and going into the fall. I'll be away for October. Maybe we can move the October meeting up a little bit so I could be here for October, and then November a little later so I could be here for both of those. But yeah, thank you again to everyone for coming. And if you have anything that we need to know, go through Werner. We're always available and accessible. Thank you.